that want to be involved in public education. So thanks you guys for coming tonight. And this is an amazing panel to be a part of. I have so many things that are in my mind to talk about, so I hope I can fit everything into something coherent. But I think I want to sort of tell sort of the story of how I see what's going to be in the movie tonight, sort of connecting with what's happening and what's been happening in Portland. I've been a teacher for 11 years. And that kind of coincides with when No Child Left Behind legislation was passed. And to me, that's a nice starting point for the education reform movement, although the reality is it's much, much older than that. But, it was 2003 when No Child Left Behind legislation was passed that said that if by 2014, if 100% of students in every demographic group were not passing their grade level benchmarks, and the benchmarks needed to be rigorous in reading and math, then that school would be subject to closure. And that's what the law still says. And at the time, I just thought that was ridiculous and didn't really think much about it because, of course, a law like that wouldn't stand. We had 10 years to get there, and I was sure that it would not be long before someone would realize that was ridiculous. Well, I'm still waiting for somebody to do something about that. But what I have seen happen is the school I was working at the time got closed. I was teaching at Gregory Heights Middle School when we were closed, largely because we did not meet the number of kids passing. It was a school that had a very large number of English language learners, students, many students living in poverty, many students living in crisis. And along with about a dozen other schools in Portland, we were closed, many were reconfigured, kids were moved around, families were sent to different buildings. Some of the buildings are still shuttered today. And even at the time, I thought, well, this couldn't really be education reform because this is Portland, and we're liberal, and we love our schools. And I trust our elected leaders, and I'm sure that they're being sincere when they say this has to happen because of budget cuts. And then, a few years later, I found myself teaching at my neighborhood school where my kids go at Vernon. And then last year, our school was put under threat of closure, along with 4 other schools in Northeast Portland. And that was 1 year after Harriet Tubman Middle School, which, Steve, you were involved in the beginning of that school back in your first school board tenure. And Humboldt Elementary School, both majority African-American schools, both schools with very high poverty, were closed without a public process. It was like a 2-week window between when the school board said we're closing the school and when they voted on it. And the very next year, they came around looking to close more schools in the Jefferson cluster. And, at that point, I really couldn't deny that what's happening in New York, what's happening in Chicago, what's happening in Philadelphia is, in fact, really happening here in Portland, Oregon. We're not immune from it. It's the same tactics. Schools in poverty are labeled using high-stakes test scores to show that those schools are not as good as other schools, despite the fact that since it was invented, high-stakes standardized tests have always been used to segregate, to stratify students along class and racial lines. And anyone who knows anything about what standardized tests do knows that, and yet those numbers have been used across the country to justify the closure of schools, to justify sucking resources out of schools that need the resources the most, to justify giving families choice options to choose to send their kids to a different school and let the school in their neighborhood that other people depend on wither away. And we've seen that happen here in Portland time and time again. And it kills me. And it kills me to look in front of my students' faces and know that they don't have what kids just a few blocks away might have. To know that, we have the resources to give kids art and music, but we're not putting them on the ground. Here in Portland and across the country, I think one of the bigger trends in the education reform movement is the belief that resources need to be put at the top of the structure. We're adding high-level managers, we're adding consultants, we're adding people to make tests, and we are paying for curriculum, and we are taking what would be done right at the bottom, paying people huge amounts of money to do it wrong at the top, and then claiming that there's not enough resources to give our kids the basic things that they need. So, despite all that, one thing that really gives me hope and inspiration is that I get to work with teachers, and I see every day teachers. I mean, we have amazing teachers in Portland Public Schools who, despite the fact that their resources have been taken away, despite the fact they might have class sizes of 30 or 35, hopefully significantly less than that next year, despite the fact that they have kids that need counselors and food and homes, they still do amazing jobs with the things that they have to serve the kids that they have in front of them. One thing that I kind of wanted to talk with you guys, I know Steve kind of touched on this and so did Gwen, but when we have an education system that is really focused on test scores, the things that you, and I can tell you guys kind of get this because you clapped all the right times, but the things that you see are from the higher level, people passing mandates or making decisions that encourage kids to be in seats, learning rote skills so that they can perform those skills on tests. And so across the country and here in Portland, we've seen a proliferation of canned curriculums where teachers are given a script and asked to read it. I've seen kids who are not given the opportunity that other kids have to take art and music, because if they did not pass their OAKS test, they need to sit in the computer lab and practice taking OAKS tests. It's appalling, and there is no research that shows that sitting a kid in front of a computer to practice taking standardized tests would in any way increase the quality of their education. Yet these are the decisions that are being made in some schools, because the only thing that schools are being judged on right now by our state and by our federal government is those numbers, those test scores. And it puts that crazy pressure on schools. People, I think, who would otherwise make decent decisions, deciding to subject kids to something that any parent or any teacher or any community member would know, and any kid would know is not what the best education looks like. But despite all that, I see teachers kind of quietly subverting the system by teaching the way that they came into education to teach. Thank you. I see teachers making, instead of practicing the testable skills, the list of things that the Common Core or the state standards say that is going to be on the test, I see teachers making really amazing, engaging curriculum that is unique to the location and the kids that they have. My colleague, Matthew, who teaches at Lent School, really high poverty group of kids, he designed a unit where students learned about problems in his community. They learned about food deserts, and they learned about lack of sidewalks and stoplights. They went and they surveyed those problems out in the open air. They had politicians come in and talk about those problems. And then they researched solutions and wrote essays solving those problems. None of those things are tested. You can't make a test that gauges whether a student can look at their community and see a better future. You can't make a test that sees if a student can find a new idea that no one has ever thought of before, because if you do that, you get the answer wrong in a multiple choice test. And he knows that his students are going to do better on the test if he teaches that way than if he sits them down and asks them to read the recommended passages from the Common Core curriculum. But he still has to fight to teach that way. In a lot of buildings, teachers have to fight to be able to teach the way that they know is best for kids. And I'm really proud to work with so many teachers who do amazing things. Our schools need resources. They really do need more resources. And we need to put resources into the schools that have kids with the greatest needs. We need counselors. We need social workers. We need art. We need music. At our high schools, we need vocational programs and work-related skills that get kids interested. It does not get kids interested in coming to school if they did not pass their tests, and so they need to be in remedial reading classes and remedial math classes until they meet their benchmarks. If they have to be in classes, and there are kids in high schools, if they do not pass their writing test, they have to be in a class where they take writing test after writing test after writing test until they pass the writing test, because they can't graduate if they don't. We need to fight back against the system that measures kids only by things that you can put into a number, and really recognize what it is that makes kids want to come to school, and turns them into joyful, self-fulfilled, interested citizens of our city. And I know, the teachers, we want to do that. So it's great, good to guys have you all here and get your support. Thank you.